Sometimes I feel like I don't have a podcast. Hello, I am Jason Bemis Lawrence. This is Before the Stream, my podcast, where I have a musical discussion with another person about an album that we listened to a lot in our past. I'm going to try to keep this intro short because I got a long talk. Today we talked about Blood Sugar Sex Magik, the fifth studio album by the American rock band Red Hot Chili Peppers. It was released on September 24th, 1991. It's got its 30-year anniversary coming up on Warner Brothers Records. It was produced by Rick Rubin. You might have been watching the Paul McCartney doc series on Hulu with Rick Rubin. Wikipedia says the album's subject matter incorporates sexual innuendo, boy does it ever, and references to drugs and death, as well as themes of lust and exuberance. Yep, sounds right. Movies in the theater September of 1991 were Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, Child's Play 3, and The Fisher King. Whew, it had been a big summer, with Terminator 2, Hot Shots, Boys in the Hood, Point Break, and Doc Hollywood. So there wasn't as much to release in September, I guess. Top hits at that time were I Adore Me More by Color Me Bad, Good Vibrations by Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, Motown Philly by Boyz II Men. Those were all in the U.S., and Everything I Do It For You by Bryan Adams, I'm Too Sexy by Right Said Fred, and Let's Talk About Sex by Salt and Peppa in the UK. My guest has been on the show twice before. This is his third time. It's Andrew Carlson. You know him, you love him. My very dear friend, musical cohort. We've played with him and toured with him about as much as anyone. We've played together in The Building, in Heather Woods Broderick's band, Jesse Marchand's band. Other stuff for sure. His band is called Names of War. He's living and working in Durham, North Carolina right now, starting to play more music, as we'll get into at the end of this talk. We had a nice long chat about this album. We were conflicted to some degree. So, see what you think. Talk to you on the other side. This is me and Andrew Carlson talking about Blood Sugar Sex Magik.
Well, the first thing, honestly, that hit me was I saw the year that this came out, and I was confused. Because in my mind, this came out way later.
Right. You were like
I think
3 or 4?
I was like 4 when this record came out. And in my mind, I discovered this record, but that was clearly not true. But yeah, in my mind, I was like, holy crap, 1991. That immediately was like, oh, whoa, this is in a whole different context than I really conceived of.
Yeah. Same day as Nevermind.
Yeah, I was reading some article, something about the time around this record and the personnel changes and them touring, and there was a reference to Nirvana opened for them on a tour. And that, when I read that, I was like, wait, what?
Yep.
That's the timeline we're working with here? They were famous already,
yeah.
And Nirvana was had just come out. Yeah. That was they were just getting big enough to support a famous band.
Yeah.
Same thing with Pearl Jam.
Right. I know. Smashing Pumpkins were going to something. I read that, and something happened. They didn't.
But yeah, the first thing that happened was I have no sense of when this record came out or what was going on when this record came out.
It's been 30 years.
So now
it's so crazy.
Yeah. So immediately I was like, oh, I need to completely re-reckon with what this record is. I need to completely reconsider how I feel about this record. But yeah, definitely because I owned this record. I liked this record. I listened to it a ton.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a bass player by trade, Flea was iconic. He was part of my big 3. You know, it's Flea, Jaco Pastorius, and Rick Danko.
Yeah.
Those were the 3 instructional VHS tapes I had as a young bass player.
Right.
Which is insane to think about.
Yeah.
Especially all of those instructional tapes are in and of themselves insane. Like Flea's being interviewed by River Phoenix.
Oh my gosh, I forgot that.
In that video.
You told me this. I've never seen it, but
yeah, it's just like Flea and Chad Smith just like chopping out for like an hour and a half, and him just
wait, are you describing the video or this record? Or everything they've ever done?
Whoops. But yeah, so like there was definitely a period of time where I loved this record, and especially like was like trying to learn parts from this record. It's like, oh yeah, you got to learn all of Flea's bass lines from this record. It's like, oh man, you can't play Mellowship Slinky in B major. You don't know that bass part. Like, oh man, you got to get in the shed, dude. That was the first like, oh yeah, I remember learning these songs and being super into this and being like really enamored with Flea specifically.
Yeah. Well, he was Rick Danko is a previous generation. I didn't really discover the band.
I think several generations previous.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't discover the band until later.
Totally, same.
And Jocko was more jazz. He played with Joni. He was in the pop world, but you had to be looking as a kid.
Yeah.
You had to look for him or have to have an older person like really point you in that direction. Flea was like Guitar World magazine, MTV. Yeah. He was like the bass player that was featured as a bass player in pop culture. People would point out his bass lines and they would interview him specifically, and there weren't as many bass players in that time in the early I guess people.
No, he was like the only famous bass player I knew about when I started playing bass.
Yeah. People knew who Chris Novoselic was because Nirvana was a trio. They were so popular, but it was kind of a thing. Like people also knew that he was just a serviceable dude playing stuff underneath Kurt. And Flea was like somebody that was considered virtuosic in the rock pop alternative world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some of the stuff he does is still completely insane. Like he is an incredibly talented musician. No question.
Yeah.
I went on quite a journey of how I felt about this record over the last 2 weeks since we decided to do it.
Good.
I've come a long way.
I've had so many thoughts about it too. I've been a little overwhelmed trying to think about what I should jot down, and pretty much each time I put it on, it's a whole different train of thought. Some sympathetic, some less so, and we'll get into it and see where we go. I'll just say for me, there's a point in my music listening history that is a famous time in my own mind and for no one else, because it was when I discovered Columbia House, and I had a friend.
Right.
And I've mentioned this to someone on the show before, but some friend that I was playing tennis with, it had to have been around 1991, was in Columbia House and wanted to get his 3 free CDs that you would get if you referred somebody to it. So he just sat me down and was like, here's what you got to do. It's so easy. It's only 1 cent. Sign up and do it. And I did. And I didn't even know what to get. I'm sure I'd heard of some of this stuff, but also he was like steering me in the right direction. And there were only so many options. We were using, this wasn't online. We were using like a full page ad that had the CDs, like tiny little pictures and names of the albums that were available that you would like fill in on the piece of paper, the code for each one. And so whatever was on there was going to be the 12 that I picked or whatever it was. Yeah. And I'll never know what all 12 were. There's no way.
If only.
I wish. But I know that this was one. I know that 10 was one. I know that Nevermind was one. I feel very sure that Nevermind was one. I'm not 100%. But there's a few more. But this was definitely one of those. And I didn't know them beforehand. I definitely had not heard Mother's Milk or anything that came before. I'm sure I'd heard of them, but I don't know if I'd heard Give It Away yet or seen any videos. It was probably pretty soon after it came out. But so it's so much tied with me to that really early 90s time when I would just sit upstairs at my parents' house, and there was a big Kenwood stereo system they had gotten up there. I mean, this all the music I had on the CDs probably sounded great through that thing. I didn't even understand what I was listening to at the time, but it was like a nice stereo system they put upstairs with the 5-disc changer and just jack it up loud. And so putting this back on definitely takes me there where I didn't know. At some point in late 92 or whatever, I started playing guitar and drums, and I started, thinking of what was happening on guitar, on drums, on bass in this music. But at first, it was just all energy and lyrics.
Yeah.
And so I remember just jacking it up, and just the energy of this hits you immediately. And so that I completely understand people's fandom of the band and of this record. From a standpoint of turn your brain off and dance or rock out and jack it up in the car or wherever you are, it's got everything you need from that.
Well, and the image of the band too. I mean, like in everything, like I was watching the music video for "Give It Away."
Mm-hmm.
Like they look like aliens.
Yep.
Every image of them on stage, they look like, Flea's wearing pants made of stuffed animals. Like they are absolutely. Yeah, they're aliens. Like they're completely otherworldly.
Yeah.
Like every outfit, every picture, every interview, the like famous image of them with like socks over their crotches. They were just so iconically strange.
Yep.
And on the edge and on the fringe, and like again, like looking at like 1991. I was looking over like top songs of that year.
Right.
It's like Styx had a song on Billboard that year.
Wow.
Like,
yeah.
Which, I mean, I have a special place for in my heart, but like, yeah, they were just completely insane.
Yeah.
Every image of them in my mind is like, oh yeah, they're total freaks. And that was like the energy of like, oh, we are for the free spirits. We are for the like people who just want to like get crazy.
Yes.
Talk a lot about sex.
Right. And rock stars. So especially as a kid, if you're coming to this as a kid in that time, there's no understanding of the business of it or of how people are being marketed and stuff. It's just rock stars are the people that are doing drugs and dangerous and having sex all the time. And they have this weird lightning impulses of inspiration that get put on the CDs, and then they rock out their music, and then they keep doing their drugs and having sex or what, I mean, that's just the perception of a kid. I'm not saying that's.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree. Total aliens, otherworldly people. For me, I'm also realizing that I was listening to a lot of like rap and hip hop in grade school leading up to this time. And so that was a crossover. I think along with that, or Columbia House Order was sort of my switch into listening to a lot more grunge and alternative rock. But this was an easy transition going from whatever Ice Cube and NWA and whatever I was listening to, Dr. Dre and stuff like that, to a kind of funky alternative rock band. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of this, he's singing more on this record than in the previous ones. I went back through, I didn't listen to all of the 4 previous records before this, but he's not really singing on any of those. I mean, it's pretty much a lot of it is in the sort of like hip hop, hip it to the hop, to the don't stop, like kind of vocal performance.
He's just funk shouting, which arguably I have to say I prefer. Had he kept doing that, I think I would have liked these records more. Him, like Anthony Kiedis as a singer, kind of bumps me out. But like obviously, I mean, that's sort of where you get into the influence of like, I have to assume to a certain degree that especially Rick Rubin and then the previous producer that worked on, I think the previous producer worked on both Mother's Milk and the record before that, which would have been
Uplift, Mofo, Party Plan.
Oh, Mofo Party Plan, yeah. But like Rick Rubin's influence of like, no, you gotta sing.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna have you sing more. We're gonna have you like croon sometimes, and we're gonna have more variety on this record. Because like if you listen to those earlier records, like it's just 45 minutes of just funk shouting, which again I'm on board for a lot more than 75 minutes of whatever he's doing on this record.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like through that, I feel like they managed to like preserve the like funk metal insanity band, but become just like a little bit more approachable.
Yep.
Like Under the Bridge and Breaking the Girl and like those songs that like people could kind of grab onto as like, oh, you know, I'm seeing a different side of this guy. Here's his feelings. Here's his, you know, emotions. He's not just like shouting nonsense.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's no way without that transition into singing and those kind of songs that they get as big as they did and still are.
Totally.
They were kind of underground feeling. I mean, they still would have broken out with this record without those songs, even if it was just Give It Away and Suck My Kiss and those songs. Like, it still would have been like a huge party band. But I don't think, had they just kept going that way, obviously, you know, Californication wouldn't have happened because the big songs on that were the title track and Scar Tissue, and songs where he's doing the singing thing, the more fragile thing. So, I mean, that was a genius move, whether it's credited to Rick Rubin or whatever, to have both sides there. Also, the production and everything is just so much better. I mean, you can hear, even on Mother's Milk, the record right before, it's just not... Yeah, it feels older. I don't know how to describe it. I didn't listen enough to really describe it, but there's just more dated production and just less, much less slick. I think they knew that. That was part of the plan with this record. They wanted to break out. And I think they had just gotten a huge deal. I think for this one, I'm not positive. I'd have to look that up. I'm sure they were on a record deal when they put out Mother's Milk and stuff, but I think there was just more money for this one in general.
Right.
You've mentioned the length a couple times of this album, and I was trying to look up, CDs have been 80 minutes for a long time, right? But I read that at that point they were like 74, and I don't understand why that changed. I was trying to look that up when and where that changed. It seems to be up for debate a little bit, not totally set how that happened, but I mean, it seems like they filled a CD with this record. It's 75 minutes. There's no gaps in between songs.
No.
They just filled everything they could, and I don't understand. I mean, again, the caveat being, whenever we say something critical, the caveat being, they were right. It worked.
Yeah.
They are as huge as any band can get.
Yeah.
Still. And so it was the right move. But as I'm looking back on it now, critiquing, I mean, what in the world?
I mean, how many songs, literal, like, how many tracks are on this record?
Is it 17?
It's like, it's, I mean,
and I mean,
that's insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
17.
17 songs.
I mean,
like, that's,
for me,
I mean, obviously we're now in a place where like records just, no matter what the technology is, like, obviously, like, streaming, like, there's no time constraint.
No.
You know, and then there's been a huge move back towards vinyl, so people are like, oh yeah, well, we gotta be able to fit it on an LP because we're gonna do that now, which was not a concern at this time.
Right.
But I mean, I just can't imagine a band of this stature this year putting out anything longer than like 50 minutes.
Right.
Attention spans have shortened.
Yes.
You know, streaming is what it is. But an hour and 15 minutes, there are movies shorter than this record.
Yeah,
good ones.
Yeah, right. Feature movies. Yeah. I mean, pretty much it's the length of pretty much every Pixar movie.
Yeah.
and it does not
somebody
tell a
needs
story.
to put that soundtrack together for the next Pixar full feature. It's just this entire album back to front.
Oh gosh, let's do it. Yeah, it's gonna be the Wizard of Oz Dark Side thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it worked with something. Yeah, I mean, now people are thinking about how short attention spans are and how easy it is to just switch. This was a time where people were not really questioning the album thing. Bands like this put out albums. People were starting to, it feels like even later maybe, like people had put out EPs, but it feels like more towards mid-90s you saw more EPs from bigger bands, and it just took a long time for things to change, and then streaming, obviously, and MP3 is changing everything. But this, for me anyway, feels like a time of like singles, albums with singles on them, and then kind of filler songs.
Right.
And a band this big, I guess they just wanted to put everything that they could as filler. I'm sure they thought it was all great, but you fill up the album because you think it's all great, and you know that people are going to be skipping around on their CDs anyway to listen to the singles. So just fill her up and don't consider exactly how it works as the album as a piece of art.
Yeah, I guess it's funny though, because I struggle to, maybe it's the sort of democracy of like, there are a few standout tracks for me on this record. Obviously the singles are like, but like, because of the sort of homogeny of what is happening song to song, I struggle to point out like an obvious filler track. Like everything's kind of like, there's basically a party going on.
Yes.
There's a long party, and then in that party there are like 3 or 4 times where like, oh, we're going to like take it down, we're going to take it up.
Right.
This is going to be a different groove. But like pretty much like everything maintains
that level of energy.
Yeah.
That's part of.
Yeah, it's like everything maintains, like everything is basically at the base level of like Mellowship, Slinky, and like Righteous and the Wicked. Everything pretty much does that.
Yeah.
And then occasionally they veer from that. But like, because of that, it's almost, and again, this is part of the journey that I went on with this record. It's like, it's not as tiring as I would assume an hour and 15-minute long record is, because like, it just becomes the bass line. It just becomes stasis. Like it becomes, it's like on a long car drive, if you don't put on music for a long time on the drive, and then you put on like a song or a podcast or something, and then you go back to silence. Yeah. We've just raised the floor. Like silence is like a funky groove. Like silence on this record is like a funky, and it's like simple drum kit thing. And like that is the bass line. So you return to that always. And then you get Under the Bridge, or you get Suck My Kiss, or,
the
greeting song.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that, because that makes sense to me. I think I felt that in the past. The no gaps between songs helped with that. It just, if you put it on at the start, it would just keep going. And there's catchy enough choruses, and throughout most of just about every song, that there's parts that you could latch onto that would catch you, but also there's just a level of energy that's just going to keep going, and then you have the hits scattered in there that are going to catch your attention even more. I totally get that. But speaking of a car ride, the first time I went back to this and listened for the purpose of this podcast was driving home from meeting Jesse in Virginia. First thing I put on that 6.5 hour car ride, and I was getting furious. I was like driving angry like Nicolas Cage, because I knew I mean, it got into a wasteland. I mean, as late as Give It Away is on the record, it's track 9. After that, I remembered the title track, the next song, Blood Sugar Sex Magik, because I used to go, I remember often, I would sometimes put the record all the way on, but I would often go straight to Give It Away as a kid when I first got this. Just put it on track 9 because I knew that song so well, I knew the video, and I could just rock out to it, and that was that. Sometimes I'd start doing something else and the next song would come on. So I had heard Blood Sugar Sex Magik, the song, more often too. But I think, those other songs just sort of blend together for me. I didn't know them as well, and it just felt like things were going on. So I knew that My Lovely Man was coming when I was driving, but I didn't know where. I didn't know how long these other songs in between Give It Away and that song were. And it was like, are you serious? What? I had to look down while I'm driving like an idiot to be like, am I listening to the deluxe edition that is
right,
which I was, but it was still just the record front to back, and then there were some extra songs at the end. It was still the correct record, but it was like, man, I am in the desert and I can't see anything in any direction. And it just felt like this album needs to lose 30 minutes. And guess what? I can tell you the tracks immediately that will come off, and I can add Soul to Squeeze back in and still cut it by 30 minutes. Because, man, I think Soul to Squeeze we can get to later, but that's maybe my favorite Chili Peppers song.
Right. No, it's like you have to willingly enter like a sort of fugue state in order to get through this record.
Or be doing something else. That's fine if you just need the music to provide some energy.
Yeah. Well, and I think, as mentioned, like this is kind of like this is like a party. This is like a party record. It's just like you put it on at a party.
Yeah. That's fine.
You know, it's like
got other stuff.
Thinking of it in that frame, it's like, oh yeah, this would be, if I was like throwing like a fun party in 1991. Yeah, I could put this record on. Yeah. It's like, it's like, again, it like maintains that like, oh, this is cool. This is fun. This is like silly and weird and gets loud and gets strange. And then there's like, everybody can kind of chill out when Under the Bridge comes on. Like, oh man, let's everybody be quiet for a second and think about life. It's like, it would be but if you're just listening to it from like a observational standpoint, like, it's staring into the sun. Like, you should not, don't do it for a long time. Like, it doesn't pay dividends.
Yeah.
To really focus on this record.
No.
And that's part of the evolution of like my listening to this record. It's like, I spent days obsessing over how much I really dislike Chad Smith's drumming. Like, I kept getting angrier and angrier about it. Like, every time the first 5 tracks, I was listening one day, I was like, was the thing here that they just like kept tuning the snare higher per track? Like, is the snare going to rip apart at the end of this album because it's tuned so high?
Yeah, it could be. I had a Chad Smith signature pearl snare. As a teenager. Yeah. So I had to have been an even bigger fan than I remember. And it was thin. It was like 5 inches deep and metal.
Yeah.
I mean,
aluminum.
It's the sound.
Got to be aluminum.
Yeah, totally. That's
I mean, that was also, this was, I had several discussions around over the 2 weeks. Like, I was listening to this a lot and thinking about it and talking about it and playing it in my office and playing it in the car and stuff. And so I had a couple of like random conversations with other people about this record. Yeah. I work at a music store, and the drum guy, we have like one drum guy, and he's a brilliant dude and runs the whole department. He's got like 100 snare drums in his office and can tell you exactly how each of them is individually awesome.
Yeah.
And I said something to him about like, God, that drum sound, like that snare sound is just relentless. And he was like, yeah, that's how drums sounded. And like every snare drum on every record was like 5 inches deep and aluminum and had that like super ringy pop.
Yeah.
Pop and ring. Like that's just the sound of drums during that time. Because that's like one of the things that I kept thinking about, and I was like looking into this morning. Like, I think, and this is where I've come to on this record, and I kind of started here and I ended up here. It's like John Frusciante and Flea are exceptionally talented musicians. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
That's unimpeachable. They are great musicians. Mm-hmm. They're working out on this record, and whether or not it amounts to the most brilliant playing of all time in the context of a song or whatever, it's like they're clearly super talented and have like a magic feel and groove that like amounts to like some of those grooves to begin those songs. Like I keep going back to Mailship Slinky in B major because it's just like, it just feels really good when the two of them start that song together.
Right.
And then like Lenny in Of Mice of Men being handed a rabbit, Chad Smith just shows up and breaks the neck of that feel. Like, just everything feels really good, and then he comes in, scap, boom, scap. Like, oh man, like, and I kept finding myself like, oh man, like, how great would this record be if they had hired? And I couldn't finish that phrase. I was like, what drummer would have been perfect for those two. Like I can't help but imagine, like, imagine a drummer with like the feel and like deft sort of like slinky, slippy, groovy quality of those two musicians. Like, how great would that be? Yeah. But I was also in another conversation with another person at work. He like offered like, well, sometimes there can be too much magic on a, you know, like if you have like just too many really good musicians who are like really chopping it up and doing a lot of cool stuff, like it can diminish everybody else. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't agree here.
Yeah.
I agree with the sentiment, but like, yeah, Chad Smith,
he is
just, like,
chopping
doing,
it
like,
up.
The rock drummer thing on top of these grooves.
Yeah.
It hurts a little bit.
Well, that's the thing. He is chopping it up. Like, he is trying to add his own magic too. I mean, he's not sort of bringing their parts out in a way that another drummer might.
Sure.
So, I mean, you know, Dan and Jesse and I had that talk about Phil Selway and Radiohead and how it would just be a different thing if you put somebody else who was like a more technical drummer in there or something. And that's probably the case with Chad Smith too, because you could find someone certainly that would make it a little funkier, just lighter on its feet. But that's not necessarily the thing. I mean, this is still the alternative rock band where, because I mean, I had the same thoughts about it. The grooves are just heavy. They're not, and I mean weighed down, you know. I mean, it's heavy music, it's loud, it's meant to be loud, but they're also kind of weighed down because of the way he's playing, I think.
Yeah.
It's like he's a pep band drummer. You know, I mean, that's what he's playing like. Did you see the video of him in the 90s playing the national anthem at the Laker game?
I watched it right before I signed on to this conversation.
That's the
and
national
I'm really
anthem.
Glad that I did.
Yeah, that's the national anthem to him. I mean, the comments on YouTube are just like incredible. I mean, a lot of them. And I get it. I mean, drums for a lot of people are just meant to be pulverized.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's cool. Sometimes that works. I mean, he made it work sort of in a way, but it's hilarious. It's just ridiculous. It's not musical. I mean, it's kind of incredible that he hits his mark. There's nothing like, oh, he's off there. And it's the same on this record. There's nothing like, oh, he's off. But it's just, there's a question of taste and then just a question of the weight of things that is exhausting to me. And it's partly to do with the sound, as you said already.
Absolutely. Which was a very, like, you know, like the conversation I was having with my buddy at work. Like, that was just like the way that drums sounded at this time. Like, that was just a popular way for drums to sound.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like
recorded and be played.
Yeah, being pumped out on the radio, things getting louder, everything trying to be louder, CD stuff. I am sure mastering and everything changed. But also, they were in a house. They were not in a studio. They were in this house in Laurel Canyon, which I guess is Rick Rubin's place and is now, I'm sure a lot of records have been done there and stuff, but I think this was maybe the first big record that was done there. And just looking at that documentary, The Funky Monks, which is a whole thing of itself, but it didn't look like that room was like really treated. It looked like he was in kind of an empty bedroom with a drum set and the mics and everything. It didn't look like it was treated for drums. It's just as loud and ringy as could possibly be in this house. So I feel like it all contributes.
Super live.
Yeah. It all contributes, and he's playing like a pep band drummer. Like I said, it reminded me of being at a college basketball game here in Kentucky or something, and the band, you see those drummers, they're just trying to play as loud as they possibly can.
Hit the back of the room.
Yeah.
Get there.
Find the moment. Use the bell of the cymbal as much as possible. Find the moment to twirl your sticks. And make sure every snare hit is a rim shot, and then stand up and let the other guy have his time.
Yeah, on like I found myself like cracking up. You know, you know me well enough to know that I like to imagine the conversation around a decision being made. I like to imagine the scenario. I like to imagine the discussion. And listening to Breaking the Girl, I just like imagine this, like, you know, they'd like run a take and like I just imagine Chad Smith, you know, getting on the talkback or, you know, whatever, standing up and talking to Rick Rubin in the room, like, you sure I shouldn't, like, I don't know, change up the fill. Like, no. You're going to play that fill for 4.5 minutes. Just keep.
Yeah.
No, just keep doing it, man. Just keep. You sure I shouldn't, like, I don't know, go to like a ride thing? No. Just keep playing that fill. Yeah, it makes that song, again, like it makes that song feel so long and so like trudging through the mud of just like, oh, we're gonna get there, man. We're gonna get to the end of this together. We're gonna make it. But you know, obviously, and this is the other thing that it's so easy to say like, oh man, can you imagine if they had a different drummer, or if like, can you imagine, oh, what if this guy played on this record, or what if that guy played on this record? It's like, yeah, but I mean, they did, like, again, it worked.
Yeah.
They did something right. Like, again, like, look, thinking about the time, thinking about like when this album was coming out, like if they had just gotten like a cool, like funky ass drummer to like lay back and like be in the pocket and like let everything that Flea and Frusciante were doing like really rise to the top, like people might have been like, you know, it's like a funk record. Like, what do you want?
Right.
That, like, this was like that crossover of like punk and funk and metal, like, was always their thing. Like pre Chad Smith, pre John Frusciante, like it was always their thing of like, we're gonna take these things that we love and we're gonna like do them as loud and as fast as they can be done. Like Flea's whole method, like his whole style of playing is like, okay, you know, what if Bootsy Collins listened to tons of like 80s, like late 80s punk?
Right.
It's like, it's everything met with that intensity.
Right.
So like, yeah, if they had just like, if Carter Beauford had like played drums on this record, like I'm sure it would like, they would have had some cool grooves, but like, I don't know, it might have been easier to just like, all right, yeah, it's like a funk record, who cares?
Right.
You know?
It's kind of matching the level that Anthony Kiedis is at most of the time.
Yes.
I mean, I went and listened just as comparison to other like famous funk drummers to be like, all right, let me just make sure that Chad Smith is hitting as heavy and the sounds are as ridiculous as I think they are compared to other things that are, you know, funky. So I listened to Curtis Mayfield, I listened to James Brown, you know, Clyde Stubblefield, who, I mean, I put on a Prince record, which is different from that, but you know, funky but something else. And yeah, I mean, they're not hitting nearly that hard. It's just, it really does kind of skip along, and it's so much funkier, but it's not heavier. Not nearly as heavy. So I think that, I mean, James Brown says some ridiculous things at times, but I don't know if Anthony Kiedis's whole thing on this record would work over a James Brown sounding band. You know, like it would stand out too much.
No, they are two very constituent parts. Like I really do think of them as like two pairs of musicians. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, like that becomes like it really draws the sum of the parts, you know, or whatever, you know, whatever you want to, you know, call it. Yeah. And you know, that's a thing you can do with this band too, because like Anthony Kiedis and Flea are the only like completely all the way through members. Like they had other guitar players, they had other drummers. Obviously, Chad Smith has been in the band for a really long time. Yeah. He hasn't left since he came in. Right. And like the Frusciante drama of like him leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back. But you can hear, like, if you want to hear like what the Red Hot Chili Peppers sound like with a different guitar player or a different drummer, like those things are available to you. Like they're on record. Right. But yeah, you can't really, while it's interesting to think about like, oh man, can you imagine if, you know, Joey Waronker played drums on some of these songs? Like that would have been cool. That would have sounded like this or like that. But like, again, like if you know, it's the sort of thing where like if you try to take apart a rattle, it's not a rattle anymore. You take apart, it's done. It's over, you know.
Yeah.
You try to take this apart, it's like start looking at the stuff that's inside. It's like, yeah, there's no putting it back together. Like this album is what it is because of those four different individual approaches.
Right.
And that's what starts to become interesting to me about thinking about this band and thinking about them as like, this is where I get into like the band archetype thing that I think about a lot of like, I think there's really a handful, there's like a dozen band archetypes that exist that like it's easy to like draw the parallel back to like, you know, a band, you know, at the rise of like rock and roll. And for me, like I find myself asking the question, like for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, like, okay, what's their archetype? Like, okay, you have two really talented musicians, full stop, like talented musicians who are great at what they do and really unique. And then you have a sort of like magical, mystical frontman who's like charismatic and, for lack of less generous term, poetic. And then you have like a pretty standard one member who's like, yeah, you do your job and it's fine.
Yeah.
And isn't that the Doors? I think the Red Hot Chili Peppers are the Doors.
Huh.
Jim Morrison was not particularly like, you know, he had his thing. He did his thing. He had a thing that he did.
Right.
He kind of shouted and sang, and he was like, you know, I think he had a better voice than Anthony Kiedis. But yeah, it's like his approach was so much more about his like charisma and his performance and his vibe.
Yeah.
In the context of like, okay, they're like, yeah, two really great musicians and like a guy who's just holding down his end, and then this like charisma machine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think they're the Doors.
Yeah, I'm with you.
That or they're Aerosmith.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Joe Perry stood out. I feel like the members of the Doors were like the non-Jim members were searching for they were really trying to do the like synergy thing. Whereas, I mean, I guess the Chili Peppers guys are, but Flea and Frusciante really stand out as individual voices. Totally. I mean, I think that comparison works, but those guys stand out as individuals more than the other three members of the Doors do, I think.
I mean, I think of Ray Manzarek as being like a very individual talent.
Yeah.
It's pretty impossible to like not recognize his playing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And Robbie Krieger too, has like a very particular approach. I couldn't tell you the name of the drummer in the Doors. Couldn't do it.
Oh.
I bet you know.
John Densmore.
See, yeah. Not somebody I think of as like, oh man, that sound. But like the other two, again, oddly enough, I mean, you know, obviously no bass player in that band, but like Manzarek and Krieger like had a particular thing that they were doing that was framed by what Jim Morrison and Densmore were like holding up their end.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think it seemed like their goal to me was a little more musical than like when I think of Flea and Frusciante as being a little more like, you know, standout virtuosic. But maybe not. I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's definitely a strong comparison there. I mean, Light My Fire intro versus like Under the Bridge intro or whatever. They're both like very musical. They're both like kind of show offy in their way, but yeah, I like it. I mean, I hadn't thought about that band archetype thing, but certainly the lead singer, the charisma of Anthony Kiedis sticks out as that's what's carrying this band, and everything else helps, but you can't get as big as they did without someone like that doing that thing.
Yeah, especially at that time.
Especially with what the lyrics, and I mean, you know, like at this time, it's just funny to me. I was at some point listening to it thinking, some of this is so cringeworthy. How close was he to becoming like Vanilla Ice? You know, like Vanilla Ice was just a guy. And I mean, obviously there's the whole band dynamic, and they were already coming from the underground. Vanilla Ice was like pretty much just one hit wonder, flash in the pan. They had no like musical talent or whatever to fall back on, no band around him. It's very different, but some of it, gosh, feels so cringy and so emulating a lifestyle or a genre that is not really his own.
That was watching this, back to my Funky Monks comment. It's like watching that documentary, like the alternate title that immediately sprung to mind was Toxic Masculinity, the musical.
Right.
Like it's gross. Yeah. Like if you like some of these lyrics and the way that they're talking, and that, like, obviously, again, it was a different time. Some, you know, I had the unpleasant experience of like going back to watch one of my like favorite like Mel Brooks comedies and thinking like, I don't know if this is okay anymore.
Yeah.
But this was 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Things were different, but like, yeah, just hearing them talk, like, and some of the lyrics, like, that Suck My Kiss, that was not the original lyric or the original title. No. Absolutely not. I actually, my one note, I started to take some notes on these songs, and my one note listening to Suck My Kiss was, I'm upset. This is upsetting. Listening to the words of this song is,
I agree.
I'm upset.
And this isn't
okay.
Yeah, it's almost worse. I mean, I obsessed over it more that it's Suck My Kiss than what he intended for it to be.
Sure.
When that doesn't make sense. Like, when would you ever say that except in like a hardcore porno? I mean, that's not going to what he was originally going to say, obviously, is not something that you're just gonna. It's gonna happen in a polite, consensual couples lovemaking session or whatever. But still, it's like a phrase that people know, and it just Suck My Kiss is something. I mean, the song itself is aggressive, and the way he says it is aggressive.
Yeah.
But also,
your mouth was made to suck my kiss. It's just horrific.
Yeah. It gets...
To think about that being said in literally any context, including this song.
Yeah.
But it's all over this record.
Yeah,
it's like,
it is.
I started amassing a list of like phrases that I was just like, that's not okay. That's not okay. That's not okay. Like, and also, I mean, there's silliness in there too. It's like, what was the... Oh yeah, the opening. I think it's one of the opening, or one of the the first verse lines in Musicianship Slinky is like, popcorn peanuts looking at big butts.
Right.
Like, what?
Yeah.
It's gross, man. Sitting on a sack of beans,
Yeah.
Yeah. Later in Musicianship, there's some reference to shoot my load.
Yeah.
Suck my thumb. Like there's just filthy imagery.
Yeah.
All over this record. And again, it's like, oh yeah, opening song, Power of Equality, which is a song that's like about racial equality. And it's like it's the most woke song on the record. And the line "eat my thickness" is in that song.
You just can't help himself.
it's like oh man, screw you, you're a racist. Eat, suck my dick, whatever. But just that phrase is so gross. Eat my thickness. It's
graphic. Yeah. I mean, and it comes off so much in that documentary that they are bros. They are really stereotypical bros. And just talking about that stuff constantly. And so, I mean, part of me, as lyrics, it's kind of ridiculous. There is a toxic masculinity to it for sure. It feels fratty. It feels aggressive. But it also, at times, I wonder, like, okay, when am I being prudish about it? It's not lyrics that I just want to listen to anyway. But, I mean, you get to a point where art is about expressing whatever you're feeling the best way you can, and these guys,
you choose to express.
Yeah, these guys are not censoring themselves, clearly.
Yeah.
And Anthony Kiedis, as the lyricist, is not. And based on that movie and the whatever I've seen of them, they're 25, 6, 7 writing this. I think he's probably 27 when he came out. Seems like that is like just the thing going on with them. They are these young males that are just obsessed with. I mean, there's a point in Funky Monks where Frusciante he comes off as like fragile and genuine, but he's talking about these sexual things he's saying in this like very serious way that there was a really hot girl in the studio today, and I thought, if Anthony doesn't fuck tonight, then I didn't do my job.
Yeah, they're recording Sir Psycho Sexy.
Yeah. And wow. I mean, that's what's going through their heads.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, it is part of and part of me wonders how much of that is like, even in the documentary, they're aware, like they know cameras are around.
Yeah.
They're aware of it. Mm-hmm. It's not a surprise, but like, that is part of the construction of their image, is like this like free love, free sex, free party, 24-hour fun time, whatever, like is part of the image of this band that's baked into every aspect of what they do. And so despite the fact that like I listen to it now and think like, oh, this is really cringy to listen to, like it was what they were about. It was what people responded to in them. It was like, oh man, these guys are like just so free, like just super on the fringe and really weird. And again, like there's like just these like wild alien creatures that are just like, are never wearing shirts.
Yeah.
Just like never ever wearing, like I can think of 2 images in my head where iconic images of this band where like they're actually wearing shirts. And otherwise like they're just like constantly in a state of undress.
Yeah.
Always like goofing off, sweating, raging out. I mean, even I saw like a really early video of, it was like the sort of first version of this band on, Alan Thicke used to have like a late night show.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was called like In the Thick of It, which is an awesome name for a with a late night show with Alan Thicke. Also, I need to go ahead and find some old episodes of In the Thick of It because I really want to see him do interviews and stuff. But yeah, they're on this late night show, and they were playing Get Up and Jump from one of the first, I think it's the first record or the second record, and they're teenagers.
Yeah.
And they're freaking out. Like they're like from moment one, like he walks over with the mic and they're like, everybody's pacing and jittering and like can't hold themselves still, and they're just full of all this energy, and they're not wearing shirts, and they're like just like ready. Actually, comically, Kiedis and Flea are in like crazy outfits, and I'm pretty sure shirtless. And then the other 2 guys in the band, one of them is wearing like a suit. The guitar player is wearing like a full suit. But it's what, like, they've always had that energy of just like, we are 100% out there on the edge of everything all the time. And again, it's like, I think it's what, like, when you look at the other things that were happening around them, you know, they were trying to take like the hardcore punk energy and put it into this other zone, other world. And like, you know, again, like 1991, like REM was pretty massive. Like trying to think of like, you know, other stuff that I read on Billboard, but it's like that sort of energy being popular, that sort of like, oh, these guys are like just unhinged and having fun was significant. Like it was like, I remember you talking about like the, you know, 94, was it Lollapalooza or was it Woodstock or?
Yeah. Woodstock, Woodstock 94.
Like that, like the famous image of that is like everybody in the mud and they're on stage. Like they were like trying to push this energy of just like, don't think, don't encumber yourself with any, just lose your mind.
I mean, Green Day had the mud thing happen to them at that show. Actually, the Chili Peppers came out in light bulb suits. They were a night show, and I don't know, I'm sure it was still muddy and everything there, but and Nine Inch Nails came out covered in mud. But the Chili Peppers came out they were all in silver sort of space suits with these massive light bulbs on their heads, with like at the base part of the light bulb was a spot for their face to come out, and they played Give It Away first in those light bulbs. And I'm sure they were heavy and whatever, they got them off in between first and second song.
Oh yes I'm looking this up as you're describing it, and I remember.
So yeah, I mean, this record had been out for 3 years. I mean, they were getting ready, like Navarro was in the band at that point, and they were getting ready to put out the next record. I mean, they were really at a height of, I mean, they've had a long period of height of popularity, but they were huge at that point, and just putting on like crazy, doing whatever crazy show antics they wanted to do. Yeah. But yes. I wanted to say about Chad, something he said in Funky Monks was, I try to lay it down as hard and funky as I can and just let those guys paint on top of me. So that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, that in the context of everything we were saying, like, he's just laying down again, like that, like base level, like
I'm not going to get in the way of anything. I'm just going to let everybody else do what they do, and I'm going to play snare on 2 and 4 until your ears bleed.
Yeah. I can't recommend that anyone watch that thing, but just like watched as a comedy, it is I mean, just the contradictions in it. There's like, and it feels like it's put together as a comedy. I just can't believe they haven't tried to erase it completely. I mean, they don't care. Whatever.
Again, it's part of their ethos.
Yeah. But it's just like from one scene to the next, it's like Flea talking about what it is to be a Red Hot Chili Pepper and how they can't fail if they're true to each other or their brothers, and their love comes forth, and just, you know, that's the nature of being a Red Hot Chili Pepper. And then the very next scene, I feel like, is them just sort of sitting around one of the rooms of the house talking about porn stuff that they watched and how graphic it was, or like, and how some dude's junk was small, like in a very judgmental way.
Yeah.
What?
What's happening?
The most contradictory things.
The sort of mystical elements of like, Flea, and, you know, there's moments in that doc, like Frusciante talking about energy and truth, and but like I get so wrapped up in this stuff. Like, that's sort of like Frusciante goes on like a long, I thought you were winding up to talking about this earlier, but he goes on a long thing about like the erection thing, where he's like his erection is his enemy, and sometimes he feels like he has to come in order to play right, but sometimes he can't. But he's talking about it like it's transcendental meditation. Like he's talking about it with a level of depth that like you can't help but think like, no, he's dead serious. Like, this is not a bit.
Right.
Like, this isn't like a guy in his 20s like goofing off, talking about jerking off. Like, he's convinced fully of this truth.
Yeah. And that's where it feels like this sort of rock stardom, the level, because they were big, but they weren't that big at that time. It's hard to go back to that time and understand what it was. I mean, I guess they had a huge deal that they're obviously not having to, they're far removed from having to think about other jobs or financial worries or anything. It just makes me wonder, just that mindset of being a rock star and being able to just confuse yourself with these bizarre things of just like, my libido is that's true and real, and that's what we're just going to put forth in everything we do. But also there's time in the day to meditate and read weird, deep stuff. And so it's all just going to be this weird cocktail of grossness and thoughtfulness. I had written down like when hero worship in the sort of rock star way has gone too far and the world needs to reset, you get Anthony Kiedis saying every man has certain needs, talking about them dirty deeds. Yep,
I had it written down too. That lyric.
It's like it triggers an M. Night Shyamalan movie where the world just fights back. And maybe that's what spawned the internet being a big, like being as prominent of a thing as it was. That line,
that's the thing that like ultimately, like I think what I came around to listening to this record is like they're pretty sincere about everything they're doing. Like everything is played to the hilt. Everything is sung to the hilt. Like you watch Kiedis like singing in that like weird little room, like staring wistfully out the window while he's singing this stuff with his hands all over that SM7B, which like I watching him like manhandle a studio vocal mic like he's on stage, like swaying back and forth. Like you can't help yourself. He can't help himself. That's how he does it. That's how they all do it. And like even thinking about, there's a moment in the doc where Flea talks about like Rick Rubin like kind of coaching him on like what to play and had to like pull back and like don't just do the hyper slap thing all the time. Like you can pick your moments and play differently, and like they're all like at whatever their version of 110% is. Doing what they're doing. Whether it holds up is maybe one of the things we're here to talk about. But the effort put forth and the sincerity with which they greet the task, however silly it might be, is like it's there, which at the like that's sort of where I ended up, is like I can't hate this record. I want to hate this record. Conceptually, I want to hate this record, but like they did a good job at what they were trying to do. Rick Rubin made some cool choices. Like the opening guitar riff to Give It Away is like arguably one of the most iconic guitar moments, you know, in at least like opening guitar, like immediately, like everybody stopping the tracks. You know what this song is.
Yeah.
Like, you know this. Like you've heard like, like that's just like all of that. Like Frusciante wrote like a bunch of like really, really cool guitar stuff.
Yeah.
It's like instantly recognizable and like is killer. Like it's upsetting how much I can't hate this record.
Let's talk about Frusciante for a second, because I mean he's one of those, when people talk about cool guitar players from this time, he comes out all the time. It's interesting to think back on how I've used this comparison a couple times and thinking about it. We're in 2021 right now. Kid A is like 21 years old. And Radiohead stuff is still a reference point for me. I mean, I guess In Rainbows is 14 years old. If I was making a big record, I'm sure whatever I play right now is still influenced by how much I listen to Radiohead, how much I like their recordings and stuff. If you think back from 1991 to stuff that was happening 20 years, 15 years before that, you have Jimi Hendrix and I mean, Zeppelin.
Absolute through line.
Yeah. So there's definitely, I mean, and they had already covered Jimi Hendrix quite a bit. They recorded some Hendrix covers during these sessions that are on the bonus tracks or whatever. And they had covered Fire records before. And there's clearly a Jimi Hendrix thing. And I hear it in his guitar playing. There's some Zeppelin-y sounding stuff. Is that Breaking the Girl? Maybe that has the 12-string at the beginning. That sounds pretty Zeppelin-y.
Totally.
So it sounds like classic rock in its way from that standpoint, or influenced by classic rock, but that stuff was like Radiohead is now at that time.
Yeah, it was just in the public consciousness. Yeah. Happening.
Right.
But no, I mean, his guitar playing is like is super clearly influenced by those sounds. Mm-hmm. But he's got he's blending and fusing those, like, I think of like this like super clean, right on the edge of breakup, like Hendrix sounds. Yeah. And he's using that to like this other effect. He's using it to like this like more melodic effect. But then he's like also capable of doing like the heavy rock, huge, you know, shred stuff. Like he's like, again, like very clearly a student of guitar. Yeah. He's like very clearly spent a lot of time learning all of that stuff. Yeah. And the fact that like you can like probably assume pretty strongly that like the reason they were like, oh, we should record those Hendrix covers is because like Frusciante was probably just like in the studio playing that stuff. Because he knows it backwards and forwards, and like, oh, we might as well just play it. Like all the other parts of that song are like, we can learn it. Like, let's do it. John knows how to play it. Yeah. But no, he's an incredible player. Yeah. And like very clearly was a key to unlock something with this band. You know, it's like he's widely heralded as like, oh yeah, the Frusciante records are the ones that are, you know, the next record after this, like he was gone.
It's so clear. It's not nearly as popular because not everyone listening to the Chili Peppers, I mean, they're huge at this point, and for the next record, and Californication is their biggest record, the one after that. So, I mean, it's being listened to by millions and millions of people. A lot of people are not processing what they're hearing on guitar. They don't care the difference between Dave Navarro and Frusciante, but One Hot Minute was not nearly as popular. So it's not a direct correlation necessarily. The songs weren't as catchy, but it feels like that you can point pretty clearly those three records in a row. The one he didn't play on was not nearly as inspired. Yeah. Yeah. Just on a visceral level, on a level that a lot of people that aren't musicians respond to.
Yeah, it lacks the sort of like immediacy and intensity. Not to say that like Californication is like a really intense record. Yeah. Like there's actually like a lot of just kind of ballads on that record, but like the guitar playing, the band playing in general, like he was very clearly like pushing the other two members of that rhythm section to like do things. Like they had to reckon with John Frusciante and like what he was bringing. And I think probably what happened with One Hot Minute is like Navarro showed up and was like, all right, well, what do you guys want me to play?
Yeah, right.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, what are the songs?
Yeah.
Have you written anything? Like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Where like Frusciante very clearly, and probably like to the detriment of like some of the band relationships, like he of everyone is like, seems like he's going to do exactly what he wants to do musically, period. And like I read some stuff about him, like I think it was on Mother's Milk, like arguing ad nauseum with the producer about like how the guitar was going to sound.
Wow.
And then I was reading an interview with Anthony Kiedis, or I was watching an interview with Anthony Kiedis, and he references like them playing Under the Bridge on Saturday Night Live. Have you seen that video?
Not recently, no, but I saw it back then, I'm sure.
So I think I was reading an article. He tells this story about like Frusciante like just kind of played whatever he wanted to play. Like I think he was like probably pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
But he did not play, like he was elaborating on the opening lines to that song live on television. It was like their first
right.
It's like their first time on SNL.
Yeah.
It's a huge moment for them in their careers. And he was just like, I'm just going to improvise a little bit inside this intro. And he like really clearly threw Kiedis off rhythmically.
Yeah.
He's playing all this extra stuff. Like all of this to say, like he was not going to compromise what he wanted to play ever.
Yeah.
And I think that forces, when you have somebody like that in a band scenario, like it forces everyone to like adapt around that, as opposed to like everybody kind of deciding democratically, like, okay, you're going to play this and I'm going to play that. And it's like when everybody has to conform to like, okay, this is what's happening right now. It's the whole thing of like, constraints are a lot of times like really important in being creative, like having a small number of options and having to choose between those, or being kind of forced into a corner and having to decide how to reckon with that, like is a lot of times more inspiring than just like having a blank page.
Yeah.
But yeah, that seemed to be Frusciante's like his role in this band, was like, everybody's going to need to come to my house. Yeah. Here are the guitar parts. What do you guys want to do with them? But this is what I'm playing.
Yeah, exactly. Making people uncomfortable or forcing them to step up. Also, that idea of that if Anthony doesn't fuck, I haven't done my job, that like he's so devoted to the thing. I mean, that's a gross way to put it or whatever, but he seemed very, there's something else that I read about, what is it? Maybe I Could Have Lied. I think they said had something to do with Anthony's short-lived relationship with Sinead O'Connor. And he was heartbroken when Sinead O'Connor broke it off via his answering machine. I don't know how true all this stuff is necessarily, but I think he said that. And that he and Frusciante stayed up all night to write that song. There's also like a level of devotion to it, and they were at a different period. I'm sure when Navarro got in there on the next record, he's like dating Carmen Electra back then or whatever, and like just at a level of like, all right, we're rock stars here, let's do the thing, call me when I need to be here.
No, there was clearly like a pretty magical relationship between that rhythm section. Say what you will about say what I've said for the last hour about Chad Smith's drumming, like the three of them had a thing, clearly, and have continued to like deliver on that. A lot of the guitar and bass playing on Californication was probably the first record that I like was actually like old enough to like actually go and buy myself. Like I played that record a lot. I learned a ton of the stuff on that record. And again, like musically, like there's some really cool stuff happening on that record. Kiedis is still like doing the like rock yodeling singing stuff that like, again, like his voice for me tends not to hold up at all. Basically on any of the records, like this one and forward. Like it's hard to find fault with the earlier records where he's just like shouting and having a good time. Like you can't really critique someone shouting. Like that's you could have been louder,
right.
What's the critique for shouting?
I mean, you critique the lyrics and you critique like where it came from. It does sound very like old school rap or funk. That it's kind of an aside. The idea of proclaiming these things, like to the funk stuff cracks me up. I know that's an old school thing that the older funk musicians I respect and stuff would do, but it's just like to the funk I fall in line or whatever he says, and it's just such a funny idea to me. But Yeah, I mean, in some ways, yeah, you can't critique it, and in some ways it feels open to critique for me because there's no, like, you're not really worried about his pitch or his melodic choices or anything. It's just the lyrics, and it's just the influence of where it came from. You know, part of my overall reaction to this band as a whole was just, well, they found a thing and they just sort of kept doing it, which I think is true in a lot of ways. But I mean, he went through a progression of figuring out the singing thing, and he found a fragility in there, like we talked about earlier on, that dichotomy between the aggressive funk stuff and the fragility of him singing. I mean, that so he did go through a journey of learning how to. It's debatable how good he got as a singer, but he found something that millions and millions of people respond to, and there is this like funny fragility. It's funny to talk about toxic masculinity and identifying with fragility in the same it's on the same record. I mean, Under the Bridge, to be able to add that story to everything they're doing, that he was a drug addict and he actually lived under the bridge and he didn't, like, had nothing, that's a whole other part to the story that people can identify with. And it kept
and oddly
going.
enough, like, having brought up Californication now, like, thinking about the singing on that record, I still don't particularly like his voice, but it's not as, like, I think of the singing on this record as being, like, almost, like, comical. Like, I just refer to it as rock yodeling, which is that whole, like, all that stuff is, like, a joke. Like, it's just, it's silly. It's hilarious. Like, that's the Aerosmith comparison for me. It's like, there are a lot of moments on this record where Anthony Kiedis sounds like Steven Tyler. And I hate it. But his, like, Californication, like, the singing style is markedly different than that. Like, he's kind of found, like, he kind of just has that one register that he can reliably do, but he does it. Like, I don't think of the singing on that record as being, like, bad. Yeah. Again, I think of, like, the drumming and the lyrics as being, like, kind of silly, but, like, he's, like, kept moving the needle for himself just enough, and then, like, referring back to past success. Like, I was like browsing through the next record after this, after Californication, which was By the Way. Yeah, it's By the Way.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
And there's a couple of, there's like a couple of, goofy ballads on there. There's a couple of, like, there are songs on there that, like, sound like 1989 Red Hot Chili Peppers, where they're just, like, freaking out and doing the, like, super crazy, slap thing, and, like, everybody's shredding, and he just peppers that in just enough to, like, keep everybody happy. Like, that's sort of the insane. Yeah. They've evolved just enough as a band to, like, maintain people that have been fans for a really long time while continuing to pick up, like, new groups of fans, new groups of people that, like, probably have never listened to the Mother's Milk or listened to Freaky Styley or Mofo Party Plan or like any of those records. They just keep picking that up. But the people that started there with them, they're still, like, feeding them every once in a while. Like, no, we'll do one of those. We'll do a party song for you. We got it. Where it's on, like, I listened to a little bit of Stadium Arcadium, which I hadn't heard. And there's like, 2 or 3, like, vintage Chili Peppers tunes on there where it's like, what was it? Hey, Bumpa something? Bumpa.
Sure. I didn't listen to that one.
Humpty Bump.
Of course there
Humpty Bump.
Yeah. I meant to look at one of their set lists to see if they even played anything. They still do that stuff. From prior to Blood Sugar Sex Magik. I doubt it because I was trying to remember. I knew some of the songs from those previous records, and I feel like I had, like, an early greatest hits or something. There's a later
they did, like,
greatest hits.
What hits?
Oh, that's exactly
the
name.
I definitely owned it too.
That's what I had. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, because it had Real Men Don't Kill Coyotes, and some of the songs, like, oh, I've heard this song a lot, and I know I never owned this record. Yeah, that's what it was. What hits? That's exactly right. What hits? I was gonna say, in defense of Chad, when he's playing on his own, there's definitely nothing. I mean, we've already talked about it. It's the sound, it's how hard he's playing and stuff. It's weighty, but I mean, he's got chops. He can play. It's not like it's a taste thing, but also I wonder, if I'm going to critique Flea and Frusciante at all, part of being a band and part is, like, identifying what's happening in the band as a whole, and maybe you got to simplify your part. Maybe you got to. I mean, they didn't need to. Again, it worked out as well as it possibly could have. So
yeah.
But also, I think maybe Anthony Kiedis' rhythm is not fantastic, and that sticks out as well. It doesn't have to be. I mean, he's kind of the soloist, and a soloist can be ahead of the beat, behind the beat, however they want to go, and it's kind of the rhythm section's job to stay steady. But I think he may be. I wasn't really zeroing in, listening to stuff over and over, trying to figure out where he was rhythmically, but just seeing him flip and flop around, recording, and hearing some of the older stuff, I think maybe that could contribute to some of my
sure. He's click track essentially.
Yeah.
No. This is where one is, Anthony. We got you.
Yeah.
Anything more complicated than that, danger.
I wonder what kind of editing or what kind of cleanup they had to do in the studio. I just think of how much when you're recording on your own, and obviously they're recording some really loud songs, so some stuff on the vocal track that might sound a little dirty is just not going to be heard. But I wonder what kind of cleanup they had to do, and that he's like pulling the mic off of the stand, finishing a take and being like, somebody come put this mic back on the stand. And I'd be like, fuck you,
I
dude.
love that. I love that.
I feel bad for the intern that's there.
Oh man, the kids that were working that session. They must have also thought like, oh, someday I could be this guy.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, like if you were, I don't know, it's like a 19-year-old like recording studio intern, and you saw those guys living, they have like a full-time. Again, going back to the documentary, like there's like a guy who's just like full-time, like going to get them stuff.
Yeah,
just like picking up their kids at school and getting groceries and doing their laundry. And just like if you're a 19-year-old, studio intern, just like that's what you're seeing. Like, man, in 7 years, I could be.
Yeah. That guy that was
I could be
getting
having a
stuff.
mutton chop growing contest with my friends while recording a record and getting paid to do it.
That guy seemed a bit older, and he didn't have that ambition. Like he was truly, it was kind of endearing that he was truly, he knew his role and was like, if I don't go pick up their laundry and their dry cleaning and stuff, then they can't devote themselves fully to making this incredible album.
It's
kind of endearing.
Yeah, no, he was a devotee, no question.
Yeah. So some of the iconic musical things that happen on this album are easy. They've been played so much. Under the Bridge has been played so many times, and it's just become part of the thing. You don't even think about it anymore. But that guitar part, I mean, somebody my age, maybe even your age, like learning guitar in the 90s, you learn that intro. To me.
Period. It's required reading.
Yeah. And the video was iconic for me. I wanted a hat like that. I just thought he looked so cool standing on his little podium in the sky, whatever. He looked like you couldn't really tell where he was or anything. There's no sense of place. So he's just standing there and playing that in that hat. I just thought that was the coolest thing. Seems so expressive. Who is
Wait, describe the hat. I don't remember the hat.
I'd have to look back at it, but I feel like it's a winter hat.
I feel like your birthday's coming up.
I think it's like a winter hat with the ear flaps and the ties coming down where you can tie it under your chin if you want, but he's letting them hang, of course. Yeah, totally. It's like a knit.
God, what hat. I mean, again, like that's that sound.
Yeah, it's a Jaguar.
Super compressed.
I mean, in the video it is.
Yeah. Sounds to me like a Strat on the record.
Yeah.
Who knows? But that like uber compressed, just barely clean. That's a very like Hendrixy guitar tone, and it sounds great. Like that's a great part.
Yeah.
You should watch him playing that intro on SNL thing.
Well.
Also, like I'm fairly certain on the record it sounds like it's two separate tracks to me. Mm-hmm. It's two separate guitar tracks being played.
Okay.
For separation and for, things to ring out. Because there's functionally some stuff like, it's not possible physically with one hand.
The bass notes versus
things.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was a hard thing to learn to play. Yeah, for that reason of things still ringing out. I remember that. Speaking of Anthony, again, the Give It Away, the like rolling your R, give it away, give it away. That was such a catchy thing.
Yeah.
So that is so catchy. I remember being like, what is he doing? What is that? Give it away, give it away. I mean, he could say, give it away, give it away, give it away. That would be a different song. It's that is like the standout thing about that song for someone that's not listening from a musician that doesn't really realize that what that guitar part at the beginning is whatever. You're not listening for a tone or any of that stuff. It's just energy, and then it's just, what is this guy doing with that line, that chorus line? I thought it was awesome.
There was definitely a moment listening to this record where I thought, like, if all of Anthony Kiedis's parts were like played by like a trumpet, I would love this record, without question. Because I'm a lot of, again, like looking back at like what they're coming from, what he's coming from. Like Flea was super into jazz, played trumpet. Like he's essentially like he's 1 degree away from scatting most of the time.
Yeah.
It just happens that he's using words, but like the delivery is scatting.
Right.
Like all of that
right.
all of that stuff. Like it's listening to this now versus like what I know I did when I listened to it back then. Like I am absolutely certain I knew 3 words to this album when I was really involved with listening to it. Because I wasn't there for lyrical content. I wasn't there for Kiedis. Like I was there to listen to Flea shred and learn those parts. Like musically, it's engaging enough that like Kiedis is sort of a formality. Like it's sort of like just a necessary evil that like, okay, in order for this to be engaging, there has to be a dude singing on it.
Yeah.
But like I would be really interested to just hear some of these songs just like no vocal track. Just like that Beach Boys box set that came out where it's just like we'll just get rid of the vocal track for you and you can see what's going on.
Yeah.
Because some of it would be really fun to just listen to.
Yeah.
Obviously, other stuff would be hilariously boring.
right. Some of them, I was going through again with the drumming. Some of them, it is appropriate to have that like that stadium style drumming, and some of them not as much. I mean, I think that would stick out even more. Yeah, I mean, for all the influence that we can compare it to now, and the classic rock stuff versus funk stuff versus rapping, and they did a good enough job. Whether it's themselves, certainly publicity and everything, of making them feel like their own thing that is kind of beyond comparison.
Yeah.
That's where they launched this massive popularity that still endures, I think.
Well, they moved, like I was saying, like they moved the goalposts, they moved the needle, whatever, like just enough record to record where like Californication doesn't sound anything like Mother's Milk at all. I mean, it's the same band, or most of the same bands, but like they evolved just enough to keep growing their base in the way that like bands that have done well over a long period of time do. And if they had like just kept making records that sounded like this, sounded like Blood Sugar Sex Magik, or that sounded like One Hot Minute, like if they kept doing the same thing, even though it worked at the time that it worked, would have fallen into being, not really relevant anymore. And that said, like I definitely couldn't tell you any songs they put out in the last 10 years, 8 years. So, maybe their relevance has actually waned. I mean, God, they're like, I think Anthony Kiedis and Chad Smith are like almost 60.
I think they're 55 or something along those lines.
Yeah. So, yeah, like they're good. They had a nice run. They still tour. They still play. I watched a pretty amazing supercuts, like the gifts that YouTube gives you if you're going down that line. It's like, I watched a supercut somebody had put together of the current guitar player, Josh Klinghoffer. Yeah, I think the title of the video is just like best moments of Josh Klinghoffer covering for Anthony Kiedis. And it was just like a bunch of clips from live sets, from a couple of years ago of like Anthony Kiedis like very clearly like forgetting the words to a song, and Klinghoffer just steps up to the mic while playing like John Frusciante licks and just sings the part. Like just takes over while Kiedis composes himself, and he's like, I know where we are, here's the chorus, and he gives it back to him. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
That's incredible. But like, it's been 30 years since he was probably like, kind of high and wrote these lyrics. Like, sure, man. Like, it's okay. You forgot some.
Yeah.
It'll be all right.
Yeah. It's about the energy. It's not about the precision of, yeah.
And actually, I was super impressed at Klinghoffer's ability to like, he just kept taking over. Like, it's actually a pretty fun video to watch of like, oh, this guy knows these songs well enough, knows his parts, knows the lyrics, knows what everybody's supposed to be doing, that he's just like seamlessly like, I got it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it, guys. I got you. And Keita's clearly like not having an ego about it. Just being like, oh, cool, Josh got it.
I mean,
thanks, man. It's like, you drop your wallet and somebody picks it up and hands it to you.
Yeah.
It's that level of
I mean, that would be amazing about having been like being that big of a rock band for that long a time. If you need somebody to do exactly what you want, you're going to find somebody who's a great musician and knows your shit front to back.
Totally. Yeah. They can still play all these songs. Flea can still do it.
Yeah.
Keita definitely has lost some range.
Oh, sure.
There was definitely some spots in that like compilation video of Klinghoffer playing where I was like, he's singing this because Keita can't anymore. Right. And that's cool too.
Right.
Good for him.
I looked at just like some concerts from 2019, right? Like probably the last time they were playing shows, and not all of them, but so they played 4 covers. They played 3 songs from By the Way, 3 songs from Stadium Arcadium, 3 songs from The Getaway, which is the most recent, 2 from Blood Sugar Sex Magik, 2 from Californication, 1 improvisation, and 1 from Greatest Hits. Who knows which? Soul to Squeeze, which is which is from Blood Sugar, basically. So those previous albums, like they don't need to play any of those at a concert anymore.
I'm sure they trot out like higher ground from time to time.
Sure, for sure.
But that's probably
a cover
from another cover. Yeah. Good point.
And we didn't talk much about Soul to Squeeze, but I mean, that's another one. I think it's really funny that whatever I could find about them not including that song was basically saying that it's too close to Under the Bridge, basically because he's singing, I guess, and it's not like a hard funkin' song. It just cracks me up that they couldn't have 2 songs like that, but they do have 16 that are just like hard medium tempo funk.
Right.
Some just blend right in together. I don't know. I love Soul to
somebody
Squeeze.
at the label was like, no, this isn't what you guys do. We'll give you 1.
I mean, I love that song. I remember buying that on cassette single.
Nice.
So I'm almost glad that it came out separately. There was something different. I didn't realize it was part of the sessions of this album because it was like on the Conehead soundtrack or whatever. It was a hit at least a year later or something like that from soundtrack. They also did a cover of a Stooges' Search and Destroy, which I thought I remembered from like the Beavis and Butthead Do America soundtrack or something.
Sure.
But it was something along those lines. But yeah, Soul to Squeeze, I loved having that cassette single in my car. It feels like the drumming's creative on that one. Still hitting super hard. But and his vocal performance is an Anthony Kiedis singing early on performance, but there's just something. It doesn't have all that sex stuff happening, and it's just there's something genuine about that song to me. I loved in the movie in the Funky Monks seeing them do the overdubs and how that stuff sticks out. Then when you listen to the record,
yeah,
like those
absolutely.
Him playing the like concert cymbals for those parts in Soul to Squeeze, like, oh wow. Those really are prominent, and I never noticed back when I used to actually listen to the song, or I didn't understand the difference. Funny. And in Breaking the Girl, there's all those different percussion things that they're all playing.
Oh yeah, the garbage percussion.
Cool. Yeah. I like that stuff.
Yeah, the clip of I think it's the second time they cut to Flea when they're filming those in Funky Monks, where the expression on his face is just utterly terrifying. Like it looks like something from like a David Lynch movie. Like it's he's so focused, just slamming this pipe against like some bricks or something. It's so. I feel confident that at some point in my life I will have a nightmare that's just that clip playing in black and white.
That's so funny.
So serious, so dead serious. It's like, oh man, got to make sure make sure I get this right.
Oh man. I mean, overall, seemed like just so much fun to be in a house making a record, having all the time you need. On Soul to Squeeze, the bass when they're going out and they're like repeating the chorus. Did you listen to the song? I mean, it's not on the record, but
I actually haven't listened to this song, and I kind of like. I'm sure I know it. I just want to refresh I'm sure I know it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the bass part. Yeah.
It feels like it sticks out more. I don't know if someone else mixed it or if they mixed everything for this, or if it's like came from a different mixing session as this. But it feels like the bass is even more on top in this song. Yeah. And at the end, they're repeating the chorus, and he plays some really soulful stuff, just like some solo-y stuff because they're fading out at the end, and the chorus is just going to keep going. But man,
can't help itself.
Stuff like that. That's like, oh yeah, I some of the things I remember why I loved this band back then.
Yeah, like I said, I really came around listening to this. Like, am I gonna put this on tomorrow? No, I won't do that.
Yeah,
but like, yeah, again, like I went into it thinking like, oh, this is gonna be another like joke a minute conversation about like a very silly album, and there's a lot of stuff that is pretty hard to hate.
Mm-hmm. But again, cut it by 30 minutes, cut it by 35, and then add Soul to Squeeze. Their red hot thing at the end is just an extra little slap on the face.
Yeah.
That's so bad.
No, I mean like this. It's two records.
Yeah,
they could have gotten 2 records out of this.
They could have, but I mean, I just don't. I think that the stuff is filler too. Like the songs, I think you can just lose the song. They can be B-sides or for deep fans. But if you really want to make a really good, long-lasting record, which obviously it is long-lasting, blah blah blah. I don't know of anybody like really thinking of this record as. I mean, they've obviously continued on as a super popular band and people love them, but I don't know if this record still stands out as like one of the great ones of the 90s. I think the singles really stand out and the band as a whole stands out, but I think that if this record was 45 minutes long and had the best stuff on there, it would stand out more as like their best record and one of the real staples of the 90s and alternative.
I think you're right. I mean, it's funny. It is actually just funny how long it is. It's not necessary to be this long, but they could do it. I mean, I wonder partially if it was just like there had to be a rash of albums around this period where they were just like, oh man, you mean we can? Like, you mean we can put 75 minutes of music out on a single playable media? You know, it doesn't have to be like one of those like hilarious like double cassette.
Guess what?
Double cassette boxes.
Tuesday night, I'm doing Guns N' Roses Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 with someone, and it came out almost exactly the same time, and they filled 2 CDs. They're both 75 minutes. On that car ride, I listened to those back to back after listening to this, and I almost just ended it all. I almost just crossed the medium into an oncoming 18-wheeler. That was difficult. I mean, there's so much stuff that's like, cool, you guys are super popular. Everybody loves you. I'm sure you're feeling yourselves and loving what you're doing. Half of this, at least, is like just blues jams that you wrote that are just getting the songwriting juices flowing, and you maybe have a full record here. I mean, they do have the Guns N' Roses did because they wrote those like epic 12-minute songs. But yeah, I mean, that was happening at that point, partly, I'm sure, because bands were like just really feeling themselves thinking everything they did was gold. And people were like, I'm sure record labels like, sure, fill up the CD. People will love it. At Target, they'll see that they're getting their money's worth. Or, I don't know.
No, this is definitely like the high water mark for who cares? Just make it long.
Yeah.
Like make it really long. Like get us as many singles as we can squeeze out of this, as many music videos as we can squeeze out of this one thing.
Yeah.
Because people are going to put it in their car. They're going to put it in their Discman. They're going to like, people are going to be locked into this record until it finishes.
Yeah.
Or until they like physically have to like take it out of a thing and replace it and put it back in the case and like So yeah, they'll probably listen to all of it.
Yeah, and they'll skip around if they want
laziness.
to. Yeah, but they'll hear it enough. They'll hear the other stuff enough that they'll start to love that too. No one's going to complain about having more music on there, and we don't have to worry. They're going to buy it anyway. We don't have to worry about their attention span. Yeah, it's a totally different thing.
It's wild.
The other musical thing that stands out for me that I remembered then was I really liked his drumming on My Lovely Man. There's some like little breakdowns in between verse and chorus, but also at some point, maybe not right when I was listening to the record when it first came out, but at some point I remember noticing that song sort of turned the quiet verse, loud chorus thing, like did the opposite, and I remember thinking that was really a cool thing. It turned that on its head, that it comes down for the chorus and it rocks out in the verse. And I mean, that's obviously not that original of a thing to do, but I remember it standing out back then for me with that song. Thinking,
I had a moment a sort of comical moment in Righteous and the Wicked, which again, like super cool groove with Frusciante and Flea, like heavy for what it is, but like still feels really good. Just a cool thing that they're doing together. Yeah. And I think it must be in the verses. There's like a bar of two, or there's some feel change that Chad Smith doesn't do. And so like where the backbeat is keeps changing. Like it does that, kind of like phasing backbeat thing.
Yeah.
Which I always really like. And I found myself like, oh man, that's cool. They did that. And then I thought about it for a second. I was like, did he realize it was there? Or was he just like, is that because he couldn't conceive of a bar of whatever it was, or like a feel change? And it was just like, all right, guys, whatever you guys want to do, that's fine. But I'm going to be counting to 4 forever.
There's another one where they slow down at the end. I don't know if it's Sir Psycho Sexy that goes on so long, but
that thing is, Sir Psycho Sexy. It's like 9 minutes long.
Yeah. It's funny, you've mentioned the grooves on several songs that are the ones that I would cut. Like I wrote it out to see how long they were, to see how I would get it down to 40 minutes or 45 minutes. I mean, I would cut Funky Monks, Mellowship, Righteous and the Wicked, Naked in the Rain, Apache Rose, Greeting Song, Sir Psycho Sexy, and They're Red Hot, and add Soul to Squeeze, and it would be like a 45-minute record. I mean, not that they're the worst songs necessarily, but I mean, you got to keep those hits. Those have stood the test of time. True. And I don't know, for whatever reason, the other ones that are not hits maybe are just the ones that stuck with me more. I mean, I could see losing Power of Equality rather than some of these other ones, but it works as an opening track.
Yeah, it does. It in and of itself is like, I think the note I wrote down is like, this is a pretty woke song for it to be so deeply steeped in cultural appropriation. It's like, this is 4 white guys from Michigan playing funk music and talking about racial equality. We know what we're doing here, guys?
Yeah.
We okay? But yeah, I'm glad that I came away from this with like, you know what? They're okay by me.
Yeah. I feel that way too, even having gone through this conversation. So we've come around a little bit, and I haven't done any reviews for a long time, but I saw this one that cracked me up, and I thought I would try it in the form of a poetry reading or an earnest reading. So this is 2 stars out of 5 in the prominent place where reviews can be found in 2011. One thing I didn't like about this album that I tried in vain to savor is the rhythms. Another thing is how prestigious it is. I don't like the idea of these things being well known, but in an effort to enjoy an album, I overlook that and listen to it anyway. Sometimes. I'd say that most of this album is pretty relaxed. Lyrical infused moods. Imaginary. Profane. Fascinated. Reminiscent?
It's a review written by Anthony Kiedis.
Inevitably pressuring. Self-centered. I just didn't like the style of this album, generally. Few songs that were creative. Most of the songs don't sound that distinguishing. This is a rotten masterpiece.
Ooh, rotten masterpiece. The next album from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
I know. It ends with that. Wow, it really is poetic at the end.
Strong.
There are some real deal reviews in there. Oh my gosh. Those words. Oh my gosh. Imaginary, profane, fascinated. Fascinated. Yeah. Inevitably pressuring. I mean, wow. Incredible. Nah, but yeah, there you go. That person did not come around to it. Well, sir.
Guys.
Thank you. We went long again. At least we're cutting it down a little bit. We didn't go 4 hours.
Yeah, we did okay.
What's going on with you? You're working away. You've come out of the pandemic. You played a show last night.
Played a show yesterday. First time on stage with other people since March of 2020.
How'd it feel?
Felt great.
Yeah.
It felt really great. I talked to a few people afterwards about, like, you know, they asked the same question, like, how did it feel? Like, go play music on a stage with people. And I didn't feel rusty playing, but I forgot about all the things you have to do on stage to, like, not fall over and look like an idiot. It's like, you know, dealing with, like, oh, I got to click this pedal at this time. I got to change this thing on my keyboard, or I got to make sure my amp's not off, or like all of the logistical concerns of being on stage was like, oh, right. Where do I look? Where do I stand?
Yep.
Found myself, like, staring at, like, one stranger in the crowd for a while. I was like, oh, don't do that. That's awful. That's really weird. But yeah, it was really fun. It was really great to get back into. I've got another show in a couple of weeks, playing bass and singing with my buddy Jay Hammond, whose band is called Trippers and Askers. He's got an album coming out on a local label called Sleepy Cat Records.
Awesome.
Album's called Acorn. I got to play on that record a bit. It's really great. I'm really looking forward to that coming out. The show I played yesterday was with my good friend, also has an album coming out on Sleepy Cat Records in Durham, North Carolina. The name of which I'm not aware of yet, but Chessa's music is really, really rad.
What's the band name? Or the
it's just her name, Chessa Rich.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, super fun group of musicians. Really great sounding record. Really interesting, heady songs that still feel really beautiful. That really can be that can be said for both of those. The Trippers and Askers record is also super heady and deep, while still having, like, a really wonderful, like, kind of organic feel to it. Really brilliant songwriters, both of them.
Awesome.
Really glad to play with both of them. And yeah, like I said, playing with Jay in a couple of weeks. Yeah, so getting back into playing live music, which feels really good.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot how much I enjoyed just, like, learning tunes, learning a set of music is like, I find really satisfying. It's like doing a puzzle. Like, okay, how are we going to cover that sound, and who's going to do this part, and what's going to happen? And
yeah,
I love that stuff. So that's been really fun. But other than that, just working, getting used to being out in the world again.
Yep. Names of War.
I haven't really been doing much.
Okay.
It's
I'm gonna keep pressuring
you. It's a funny thing. It's I haven't felt compelled much to work on that stuff. I have a bunch of stuff in the drawer, but I just like playing other stuff right now. It's been fun. Yeah. Playing bass. So yeah, that's what's up.
That's it. That's the show. Thanks for sticking around. We had a long talk. That was a lot of fun. Thanks to Andrew for doing it. I'll be back soon. I've got an episode finished on Jesse Marchin's new album, Antelope Running. That'll be out very soon. And then doing some more 30th anniversary albums. Going to be talking about the Black Album by Metallica and the Use Your Illusions. Guns N' Roses, baby. Plenty more after that. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, please. And rate and review if you're on Apple Podcasts or anywhere that does that. It really, really helps. We're at beforethestreampodcast@gmail.com. If you want to ask anything, say anything. We're also Before the Stream on Twitter and Instagram. Hope everybody's doing okay out there. Thank you again for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
They're talking about Frenchin', bro.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Me say hell yes, like that's a thing.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like I don't know any other words to that song. I know every note of the bass line. I know what the guitar riff sounds like.
Yeah.
Like